quadratic equations. So your goal is to solve quadratic equations first today by graphing. And I'm going to be very light on graphing today. And to solve by square root method. So those are the two goals today. But before we go into talking about how to solve a quadratic equation, we're going to talk about what it means by solving. Okay, so solving means it's going to give you solutions. So solution or solutions of quadratic equation and I'm going to tell you what you're looking for when you're solving. So solutions are your x-intercepts. It's where the parabola crosses the x-axis. Okay, that is where the solution is located. So that's what you're solving for. Where does the parabola go through the x-axis? Okay, so your x-intercepts. Another name for solution for a quadratic equation is what's called zeros, and we use that term a lot in Algebra 2. So it's that it's going to ask you to find your zeros, or they're going to give you the zeros. You got to find the equations. You go back and forth. And then the last type of word is called a root or roots. Okay, and I'll explain that in a little bit why it's called the solution is called the roots. Okay, but what I want you to do is draw me 3 Cartesian graphs here, please. Here's 1. Here's 2. And here's 3. So y, x, y, x, y, x. When I ask you to solve the quadratic equations, you're going to get either 2 answers, 2 solutions, 1 solution, or there's going to be no solutions. Those are your only options. So either you get 1 answer, 2 answers, or there are no answers at all. Okay, and I'm going to show you what makes it 2, 1, and 0 solutions. Okay, so you ready? When your parabola, so if it's upright, it goes like this. Here's my parabola. It goes through the x-axis at how many points?
0.
2. Here and here. That's where the parabola crosses the x-axis. So if your parabola looks like this, it has 2 solutions. 2 solutions. And I'm going to call this x1 and x2. So the location of those x-intercepts are x1 comma 0 and x2 comma 0, right? Isn't that what the locations are? If those are my x values. Okay. Now if I had a parabola that looks like this parabola touches the x-axis at how many points?
1.
1, right here. So this one, when it touches the x-axis at exactly 1 point, this is when you have 1 solution. Okay? Make sense? Because we're looking for where the parabola crosses the x-axis, and it crosses at 1 point right there. I'm going to label this x, so that point is at x comma 0. Make sense? So I got 2 here when it crosses both spots. 1 here. This one, let's say I have a parabola that's up here. How many solutions would I have here?
None.
None. Because does this parabola crosses the x-axis?
No.
No. So this would be a no solution because it does not cross the x-axis. Because that's what solutions are for when you're solving quadratic equations, when you're looking for the x-intercepts. Okay? So this has two x-intercepts, this has one, this has none. Make sense? Now I could also have an upside down parabola like this, still 2, right? I could still have it upside down here. Now I could have an upside down here. There'd still be no solutions. Does that make sense? Okay. Now do you know why these are called zeros? Anybody? Why would I also call these zeros?
Because the y is 0.
Yeah. See my y coordinates? They're all zeros. Because that's why in my x-intercept, right, all my y values on the x-axis is 0. So we call those zeros because y is 0. Okay? So when I ask you to solve the quadratic equations, you're looking for the x-intercept. So when I give you an equation, you set y equal to 0 and you solve for x. That's what you're going to be doing today. Okay, so any questions with this? So everybody know when it's 2, 1, and 0 solutions. Okay? All right, so now I'm going to start with so I'm not going to, I hate solving by graphing. But when it says to solve by graphing, I'm going to show you how to do it. What I expect, sometimes solving by graphing, you can't find the exact location every time. So what I want you to do for today is tell me how many solutions you're going to end up with. So in this case, I'm going to solve by graphing. So my equation is 2x squared plus 2 equal to 0. So when you solve a quadratic equation, you want your y to equal 0. So that's why this is a quadratic equation, because that is your y is equal to 0. So there's my y. So now we're going to graph. So to graph this, what do we need? To graph a quadratic equation, what do we need?
Your axis of symmetry.
Axis of symmetry and the thank you. So what's my A?
2.
What's my B?
You move it over.
Yep. What's my A and B?
B is 0.
B is 0 and
C is
C is 2. So we're going to find our axis of symmetry. Axis of symmetry is that x equals opposite of b over 2a, which is opposite of 0 over 2 times 2. And 0 divided by 4 is what? What's 0 divided by 4? 0. So there's my axis of symmetry. So I'm going to start by my graphing. And if you notice, here's my axis of symmetry. X equal to 0. So AOS. X equal to 0. It's right there. What do we do after we find our axis of symmetry?
Find the vertex.
Find a vertex. So vertex. Remember, this x coordinate is where the axis of symmetry is, because vertex is always on the axis of symmetry. So now we just plug it in. So y equals 2 times 0 squared plus 2. And so what does y equal?
2.
2. So y equals 2. So here's 2. So here's 0, 2. 1, 2. Here's 2, 0, 2. Now coming over here looking at our A, is this parabola going up or down? Up, because A is positive, right? Because it's going up. So we know this is going up like this. I'm going to kind of sketch it real quick. How many solutions do I have? None. So when I ask you to solve this right here, this will be no solution. And that's how you solve by graphing, by looking at how many solutions you have. So if this parabola is going, if this is above the x-axis, because this does not intersect, this will be no solution. You're done. Okay, any question with this one? So let me give you another one. What if my quadratic equation looked like this? If I said, solve by graphing 2x squared minus 2 equal to 0. So we're going to do the same thing again, right? So this is equal to y. What's my a?
2.
What's my b?
0.
c?
Negative 2.
Negative 2. And let me know if I go too fast. So then AOS. Axis of symmetry is x equals negative b, which is 0, over 2 times 2, 2a. 0 divided by 4 again, right? And what's 0 divided by 4 again? 0. So here's my x equals 0. This is my axis of symmetry. So I'm going to start my graph again. And here's my axis of symmetry at x equals 0.
Couldn't negative 2 be a b though?
No,
Why?
because b is always in front of the x. Is that in front of the x? No, right? So then vertex 0, comma, remember this always goes in here. So y equals 2 times 0 squared minus 2.
It's negative 2.
This is 0. So y equals negative 2. So 0, negative 2. 1, 2, negative 2. Here's my vertex. Looking at our A, is it pointing up or down? Up. So I'm going to sketch it real quick. Oop. Guess what? How many solutions do I have?
2.
2. So we're looking for those 2, right? I have 2 solutions. So I'm just going to pick a point, right? So I'm going to try x equals 1. So I'm going to, let's try 1, because we already used 0. All right, so you plug it in. Y equals 2 times 1 squared minus 2. What's 1 squared?
1.
1 times 2 is?
2.
2 minus 2 is?
0.
0. Is this 1 comma 0 solution?
Yes.
Yeah, because that's where this is. 1 comma 0. Then what does the other one has to be?
Negative 1 comma 0.
Negative, because it's a reflection, so this other solution is at negative 1 comma 0. So my 2 solutions are negative 1, 0 and 1 comma 0. Those are my 2 solutions. Now, what was the difference between this one and this one? What was the difference? What was the difference between the two?
It was minus 2 and that was plus 2.
A is 2, B is 0, C is negative 2 here, C is 2 here. So here's your little trick. When A is positive, B is 0. When C is positive, that looks like this. Because the parabola is above the x-axis, no solution. But if C is negative, the parabola is going to be below the axis, so there should be 2 solutions. Okay, so when there are 2 solutions, you got to find those solutions. Okay, so I'm not going to have you guys solve by graphing, actually. I'm just going to have you tell me whether there's 2, 1, or 0 solutions by graphing it today. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, but I'm going to show you, so our second goal was to solve by square root method. All right, I'm going to have you solve. So this is your example number 2. We are going to solve 3x squared minus 75 equal to 0. Okay? And the reason why it's equal to 0 is when we solve is because we're looking for the x-intercepts and a y is always 0. Right? That's why we set it equal to 0. Alright, so how many solutions should I have this? What's my A in this one?
3.
A is 3. What's my B?
0.
0. And C is?
Negative 5.
Negative 75. So here's my A is positive, B is 0, C is negative, right? There should be 2 solutions. When A is positive, B is 0, C is negative, 2 solutions. So we're going to use what's called the square root method. All right? Square root method is used only when B is 0. Okay? Used when B equal to 0. That's the only time we use the square root method. Okay? And I'm going to show you. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a dash line through this. We're going to get x squared by itself. So what do we do first to get x squared by
Divide by
itself?
3.
Nope.
Oh, you subtract the 70 or add the 75.
Yeah, you got to get rid of this first. So we're going to add 75 to both sides. So I got 3x squared is equal to 75. Now I got to get x squared by itself again still. So now you divide by 3. So now I have x squared is equal to 25. I want to know what number or numbers that could be squared to get 25. So remember square, opposite of squaring is called square root, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to square root. Physically put that little radical there, we're going to square root. Square root and square, they're opposites, so they cancel out. So you're going to get x is equal to, and when you physically do the square rooting, my numbers are either 5 or negative 5. Because what's 5 squared?
25.
What's negative 5 squared?
25.
Also 25. So whenever you're square rooting a number, you have two answers. Okay? And what do we say? When A is positive and C is negative, how many solutions do we say we have?
2.
Two solutions. So my answers are 5, 0 and negative 5, 0. That's where the parabola, this parabola, crosses the x-axis at those two x values. So those are my solutions. Okay. Huh? You want me to show you when it's 1? Okay. So if I said solve, let's do 4x squared equal to 0. Alright, I gotta get x squared by itself. What do I do to both sides? Divide by 4. Divide by 4. X squared equals, what's 0 divided by 4? 0. And then opposite of squaring is square root. Square root both sides. Square root and square cancels out. X is equal to, what's the square root of 0?
0.
0. Can 0 be positive or negative? No. How many solutions I have here?
1.
One solution. This is when it's one solution.
So it's 0, 0.
So my solution's at 0, 0. That's where my x-intercept is, at 0, 0. Okay?
Homework.
What about this one? If I said 2x squared plus 32 is equal to 0.
Alright, so
Looking at this, how many solutions should I have?
2.
0.
None.
None.
Why?
And let's prove why. Because remember, A is positive, B is 0, C is positive, right? This parabola is going to be above the x-axis. So let's solve again. What do I do to both sides first?
Minus 32.
Minus 32, minus 32. 2x squared is equal to negative 32. Now what do I do after that?
Divide by 2.
Divide by 2, divide by 2. X squared is equal to negative 16. Can any number be squared and be negative?
No.
No. Because if I had negative 4 in here, what's negative 4 times negative 4?
16.
Positive 16, not negative. So x squared can never ever equal a negative number. So this tells me no solution. And this, when I graph this parabola is above the x-axis. That's why there's no x-intercept. This is when it's no solution. Okay? Now, does anybody know why we call this the roots? Why do we call these roots? See, one of the solutions it's called roots. Do you know why it's called roots?
Because we're square rooting.
There it is. Because we're square root. These are my roots. Okay? So you only use square root method when b is 0. It doesn't work when b is not 0. Okay? So you only want to use square root method when b is 0. We're going to learn other method when b is not 0 starting tomorrow. Okay? Any questions about today? So when I ask to solve, what are you looking for?
How many solutions are there?
Your zeros. What else? What's another word for zeros?
Your x-axis, your y-intercept.
Your roots. What else?
X-intercepts.
X-intercepts. You please, when I ask you to solve, you're looking for where the parabola crosses the x-axis. That's what you're solving for, so keep that in mind, all right, when you're doing this today. Okay?